3.75. Total debt to GDP was 121% when Trump took office. Now it's 123. The deficit for 26 versus 25, the first 2 months of the year, was down 110 billion, but it was still $600 billion. And that's through December. Well, actually, no, that's just the first couple of months of the year. The Dow increased. Dow went up an average of 8% a year during Biden. It went up 13% this last year. So the bottom line is that Trump is doing better on GDP growth, better on inflation, better on real wages, better on the trade deficit, better on the overall deficit, although it's still outrageously high, better on the Dow average increase, slightly worse on labor force participation, which I didn't mention, but it's down about 1 or 2 tenths, and worse on unemployment. And so it's a mixed record, but it's more positive than negative. The real question is, where do we go from here? You know, what's going to happen with regard to the tariffs? What's going to happen with regard to, you know, a number of other issues that are currently in limbo, including what's the ultimate effect going to be of AI? Because many people believe that artificial intelligence and the expansion of data centers is one of the primary reasons why we had 4.3% economic growth in the third quarter of this year. And that's obviously not going to continue forever. A lot of that is initial investment, if you will, that won't continue at that pace forever. So just a few thoughts, Nick. Look forward to hearing what others have to say.
Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't have the magic crystal ball in front of me. But so I've heard things going different ways, what 2026 is going to bring. And in one of our programs, we're going to bring in separately Dennis Stearns, who gives us the projection every year. But, you know, optimistically cautious or cautiously optimistic, I don't know. But I've heard things everywhere from the Shiller-Bowles model saying the market is overpriced and we're due for a major correction to where we're going to have steady growth. So, you know, it'll be one or the other. But with that, we're going to bring in internationally. We do have Dr. Sharif, who actually has a very interesting project that if you can show his screen on, it deals with the Ganga River, which I am not familiar with until he showed it on there, that has about 700 million people who live around the river. 700 million. We can't even fathom how big that place is. And we're also bringing in Jacoby, who is a Trump fan. Every time I talk to him, he has something positive to say. He has something positive to say about Trump, and that means they'll have something positive to say about the Trump economy going forward in 2026. So I don't know if Jacoby has a magic crystal ball, but I certainly like to hear Jacoby's thought about the economy in 2026. You think it's going to explode and be wonderful, or is it going to be implode and be horrible? So Jacoby, it's time for you to bring out your crystal ball and your positive attitude toward Donald. Please don't hold back. I know you hold back a lot on this show. Please don't hold back, because I manage pension accounts and I've been encouraging people to run to safety this year. So the more you pour it on, the more I can help people say, look, you may want to keep your pension account safe. So pour it on, Jacoby. Go
on. We are in a K-shaped economy where the top growth is great, but the bottom growth is horrendous. And that's why it's a mixed bag, because you have the average household who's struggling to make ends meet and living paycheck to paycheck, with other things rising from grocery prices to healthcare and so on and so forth. So in terms of that, because in terms of this crystal ball, now with the new Fed chair who's about to come in, which I think it's idiotic for Trump to take out lawsuits against the current Fed chair. That's just dumb, because that's going to throw even more chaos into the market. But I guess to ask Dave, with the K-shaped economy that we're having, the struggles that we had last year, because as you pointed out, the unemployment, the jobs rate. This was one of the lowest jobs years that we've had in decades. I think they said since 2003. But again, in this K-shaped economy, what do you feel can get us out of this K-shaped economy to where the bottom actually feels this, oh, great lovey-dovey thing as what the top keeps telling everybody it is? Because that's what Biden ran into.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is we have growing gaps in a number of different ways. We have growing gaps in income. We have growing gaps in wealth. We have growing gaps with regard to, skills and knowledge as well. And so many of these issues, quite frankly, are going to take, much more fundamental reforms that are going to take time in order to deal with. Okay, for example, let's take AI as an example. AI is going to be a tremendous productivity enhancing. AI is going to, be able to help us to be able to solve problems a lot quicker. At the same point in time, AI is going to displace a lot of jobs that are not value-added jobs. I mean, for example, if you're all you're doing is doing research and there's no value added to it, you're just trying to gather the facts and present the facts to somebody else who's going to end up doing the analysis, if you will, then your job is at risk. Okay. I think that, one of the problems that we have is, the education gap. Another problem that we have is, our tax system is such that, it is further exacerbating, the wealth gap. Okay. There's no question about it. But in the final analysis, frankly, we're going to have more people paying something, because over 40% of individuals who file tax returns don't pay any income tax at all, and 20% get rebates. But we're going to have the wealthy paying more. I mean, there's no question about that. And we just need to recognize that reality. We can't grow our way out of this problem. We can't cut our way out of this problem. We can't tax our way out of this problem. We got to do a combination, and it's got to be, a reasonable, allocation with regard to how much we're going to get from each one of those elements, which I'm happy to get into.
Just really quickly, Dave, along those same lines and everything, because you mentioned it, and I'll probably bring it up on our medical show too, if I remember to show up on that show and everything along those lines. But Dr. Patmos has this great conversation, and this is actually, since it's one of his home states and everything, but what is our thoughts around AI eliminating some jobs that we probably never were expecting to be eliminated? Because I understand that last week, Utah, which is a state that I know Nick has offices in, artificial intelligence got to prescribe medication. So it's the first for the U.S. Utah is letting artificial intelligence, not a doctor, renew certain medical prescriptions. So you might be getting your prescription if you happen to visit Utah from a AI doctor. So a lot of people would never have thought that a pharmacist, which used to be one of those traditional jobs that was protected, kind of like funeral home directors, would ever go the AI or computer route. But maybe it is going that route and everything like that. So as an economy standpoint, what is your thoughts around AI taking over pharmacies, particularly in Utah?
Well, first, Mark, I don't know all the facts associated with what you're talking about. I can see AI being used, in making recommendations or in being able to fill orders that have previously been given, by doctors. I don't think it's appropriate for AI to be unilaterally making new, medical prescriptions without a doctor's okay. So I'm not sure exactly what Utah did. I can see how AI could help quite a bit, but I think in the final analysis, when you're talking about, prescription drugs, that ultimately you have to have a real MD or somebody with medical expertise who's certified to be in the loop. So I'd need to know more, Mark, to be able to speak more specifically to that.
What it certainly does show a growing trend with AI. I just want to comment on what Jacoby commented about the K-shape. I call it a J curve, but it could be a K curve in terms of wealth in the United States. And this is good for Dr. Sharif to know. 50% of the U.S. population owns 2% of the wealth in the United States. So if you're in the bottom 50%, you own hardly anything in the U.S. But now let's go to the top 1%. you own 37% of the wealth. So, Dr. Sharif, when you're talking to an American, make sure you talk to the right American, the American that has 37% of the wealth. I tell people, you go into a room with 100 people, okay, there's one person in that room you want to talk to. He has 37 of the bananas, and there's 50 of them you don't want to talk to because they don't have anything. So the wealth distribution in the United States is an issue that none of the media ever brings out. We bring it out on our show, oddly enough.
Nick, hold on a second. It's not just a world. It's not just a United States issue, because I just looked it up using AI. It says worldwide wealth distribution is extremely unequal, with a tiny elite holding a massive share of assets. The top 1%, and I'm talking about worldwide, not in the U.S., own roughly 45 to 50% of global wealth. The top 10% control around 85%, while the bottom half of the world's population possess less than 1%. So this creates a steep pyramid, while with growing disparities, even as global wealth increases, concentrated among rich individuals and countries like the U.S. and China. So it looks like it's not just a global, a United States issue, but it is a global issue and all of that. Because they're even saying trends and characteristics, including growing inequality, economic gaps have widened over the decades, with the rich accumulating wealth at a much faster rate. Concentration at the top, the ultra high net worth individuals and the wealthiest countries hold a disproportionate share, and shifted demographics, with the poorest tier share shrinking. The number of adults in the middle and upper wealth brackets have grown, especially with China's expansion. So it looks like this isn't just a United States issue, but it's a global issue.
Yeah, there's no question it is. Let me just mention the last time that I looked as to who comprised the top 1% based on wealth. The last time I looked at it, which was probably about a month ago, it was people who had a net worth, this is the United States, of $13 million or more, which was somewhat surprising. I mean, I would have thought the number would have been higher. But
apparently the United States is leading, because it says the list of the countries by total wealth. The United States is 30.8. China's only got 18.6. Japan is 5%. And then after that, we get down like to Germany with 3.8 and France with.
Well, Mark, I'm saying something different. What I'm saying is, in order to be deemed to be in the top 1% of wealth for a household in the United States, you have to have wealth of $13 million. Wow. I would have thought the top 1% would have been a higher figure than that, but it's 13 million. Of course, the dollar's not worth $1 anymore either, but that's a different story.
Two quick things. I think, Nick, the idea of just going or wanting to talk to the individual with the 37, that analogy that you would put forward, which is everybody wants to do. Everybody wants to talk to those individuals. But the problem comes into play. That's not reality. The reality is that group of individuals has isolated themselves to a particular point. So therefore, you're not able to get in there, and then you end up deemed a particular way. So a lot of times you have to learn how to build and track some of the things that they've done, but also help the ones that aren't in that individual who has that 37. And that's, I think, where the problem comes into play, and that wealth gap continues to grow, is because of that isolation that we continue to, hey, Dave and Rick have $100 million. Screw Mark, screw Nick, and screw. No, it shouldn't be that way. It should be a bridge. We need more bridges than we need that separation.
Yeah, I think.
I agree with you, Toby. It shouldn't be that way, but in my world, I live as it is, not as it should be. But I do recognize it should not be that way. But it is that way. And so what are you supposed to do if you're coming in from Bangladesh, who doesn't know America for Adam, and they start, and by the way, you went to the right city, Dr. Sharif. You went to Palo Alto, where Stanford is. That's where you're going to see a lot more of the 1%ers than you would if you went to Omaha, Nebraska, or some other place in the United States. You're just not going to see
here's part of the issue, okay? A majority of American households, and I don't know the exact percent, Rick may know it or Mark may look it up, a majority of American households are living paycheck to paycheck. And so by definition, they don't have a significant amount of investments, okay? Whereas the people who are wealthy have huge investments which continue to grow. And so if you're living, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're probably, you're struggling. I mean, there's no question about it.
And on top of that, I think that is where I think more so that we need to speak on economic matters, because I think we could be that bridge on that. Because a lot of times we speak from a plateau of, and that's why I tried to point out the K economy. All the GDP stuff is great, but a lot of times that economic numbers, that GDP isn't telling me how much, my grocery bill is going to be, or my child care is going to be, and stuff like that. So I think a lot of times when we're speaking economic numbers, I think if we can take into more account of the actual things that a lot of that paycheck to paycheck is having to deal with, it helps out more so than, hey, let's just speak from this plateau. And if you're not on this plateau, you're just going to miss everything that we're talking about.
You talk about macro and micro. Yeah,
exactly.
We're talking more micro. Rick,
so half of all the U.S. households have $5,000 or less in savings.
If I can add to that just really quickly, because I did look it up and everything, David. It says a significant majority of Americans, often cited between 60% to over 70%, and that was in the 2024-2025 study, are living quote unquote paycheck to paycheck, though figures vary by source. But even like the PNC Bank did a study and that had 67%, and ADP had one that was 64%. So it definitely looks like it's in that vast majority of the population that is living paycheck to paycheck.
Well, honestly, and also I think one of the things that we kind of glossed over a little bit, and we do talk about it some, and I think Dave, you of all people can bring a wealth of knowledge around it, because it's still going to be that growth economy, and that is that AI. And that is going to hit that paycheck to paycheck household because of the actual jobs that they have that have them at that paycheck to paycheck. I had shared in the private comments because Dr. Sharif is doing great work in Bangladesh on some economic things, but also I'm in the middle of building a conference that deals with trying to help individuals navigate the AI storm that's here. I had actually made 2 ads, but all I did was and they're you can share them, Nick, if you want to. But all I did was take clips of what, for example, I think one of the clips is talking with the gentleman from Khan Academy who has he's telling you about the way he sees AI is going. I think another one is one dealing with the godfather of AI and what he sees the jobs that are going to be taken away, which honestly, that is everything that they're talking about is true. For example, the godfather of AI was talking about how the Industrial Revolution came about and how horse and buggies changed the idea around travel and cars, and that made horse and buggy irrelevant. And then during that Industrial Revolution, it made strength irrelevant in terms of being able to lift heavy things. No, well, we have machine technology to do that now. Now it's just it allows that individual who doesn't have that strength to take on those same tasks because he has machines that can help them. But now with AI coming, that's taking away the whole mental aspect of it. So they can do some basic coding. Yeah, you got to sit back and, overlook it. But now you're taking away some QA testers. You're taking away some coding jobs. You're taking away some graphics design jobs, some web development jobs, some actual. So that AI bubble and what's going on there, Dave, I would love for you to dive more into that, because that is what's hitting your middle and low Americans that are going to need economic help and a way to navigate society at this moment.
Well, let me mention a couple of things, and I want to go back to Rick because I think Rick hadn't been able to finish his comment yet. Okay. First, there's no question in my mind that AI is going to provide new opportunities, tremendous productivity enhancements, new innovations are going to be created. But there's also little question in my mind that people that are not highly skilled are going to be more adversely affected by it. There's no question about it. Okay. I use AI all the time for research. Okay. But a lot of times it doesn't get it right. Sometimes it gives you bad information. And so even if you end up using AI to do research, you're going to have people there that know something about the topic to be able to discern whether or not what they're giving you is accurate or not, if you will. And so that means that people that are not in that position to be able to make that kind of judgment, that are just doing busy work, if you will, they're going to be displaced, and it reinforces your point, Jacoby. Let me just mention one other thing and then turn it to Rick. We got a question from a viewer asking, well, what's the effect of Donald Trump's deregulation actions and tax actions, on economic growth and on this disparity that we're talking about? Okay, first, deregulation in general enhances economic growth, but obviously you need some protections depending upon what issue you're talking about. Lower tax burdens help economic growth, but those tax burdens may not be equally shared. In other words, you could have some that benefit more from the tax cuts than other people do. I will tell you that that when the bill first passed, not the one big beautiful bill, but when it first passed in the first administration, tens of millions of people were taken off the tax rolls because the standard deduction was raised dramatically, which made it a lot easier for people to be able to file their taxes. At the same point in time, the wealthy tend to benefit more, and obviously corporations have benefited a lot because of the tax reforms that have taken place in the past, and most recently through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And then that comes to, all right, well, if corporations benefit, then who are the shareholders? And then you come back to, all right, well, who has the wealth? Who are the people that are investing in these things? And so, at the same point in time, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, you have no tax on tips, you have no tax on overtime, you have some tax relief with regard to Social Security participants. Those by definition affect people who are, in jobs that, tend to have that. To the extent that you're talking about white collar jobs or executive jobs, you don't get paid for overtime, you don't get tips, but you might end up getting stock options, and you might end up getting big bonuses and other types of things as well. Because a lot of people don't realize the wealthy don't make their money on wages. The wealthy make their money on investments, and top executives don't make their money on their salaries, although some of them have very generous salaries. They make it on stock options, which by definition are investments, which by definition get taxed at a lower rate than wages, which by definition you don't have to pay Social Security and Medicare taxes on, because most Americans pay more taxes for Social Security and Medicare than they do on income tax. It's a very regressive tax, but at least you get something for it. You get Social Security and Medicare. All right, Rick, let me go back to you.
Yeah, so I think Americans have been freaking out, ever since we got the iPhone. That if you look at the surveys that where you ask voters, is the U.S. on the right track or the wrong track? We've been strongly wrong track since at least 2012, and I would guess it goes back even further than that. That the wrong trackers have been between 51% and 80% since 2012. The reason that given for Trump winning in 2016 was economic uncertainty or anxiety, and so you've got half of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, and technology driving super fast changes. So even well-off Americans feel, uncertain. So we've just been, just losing our shit for the past 15 years.
Well, Jacoby, let me come back to something you said earlier, and that is, when you look at the fact that a significant majority of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, okay, and you think about microeconomic issues, then what are some of the issues you need to focus on? I would argue that food, energy, housing are probably the big three. Those are the big three things that everybody has to have, okay, on a day-to-day basis to survive. There may be other things you may want, but those are three things that you have to have. And so therefore, more emphasis, I think, needs to be placed on those things when you're talking about microeconomic data.
I would also add in childcare and healthcare. So there are at least 5, because childcare is the expense around that affects, your food budget, your housing budget, everything else. And that's what people think about. How am I going to feed my child? And then if you want to think about, I guess, government wise, based on science, a child who is focused on food deserts and places where food insecurity is big, that's where a lot of the education standards or education outcomes are a lot lower. So that food insecurity is huge, but also healthcare, because a lot of reasons that we have a lot of problems with, within our society in terms of, sicknesses. Mortality rates, among pregnant women, because right now there's a young, what was she, a midwife or a nurse that just passed away. But then you talk about, why did she pass away and dealing with that. So you have your insecurities around healthcare. So those, food, housing, energy, healthcare, and childcare are your biggest ones that people really, really focus on. And right now, I agree with what Rick stated is, yes, people were looking for a populist. People were looking for someone to speak for them, because those things were so, people felt those things are so out of whack. So they went with that populist movement. And I think what happened with COVID, people absolved all the insecurities and craziness that we had the first Trump term and placed it all on Biden and said that COVID was a Biden problem. And then it became even more insecure or more crazy in our minds. So then that's how we ended up with Trump again, is that people were so, again, in that position that Rick, I think, pointed out, is dealing with the economy and afraid.
I would agree that healthcare and childcare are major issues that are of concern to a vast majority. But you have to keep in mind that childcare, we're now to where we have only 1.62 births per female, which means we have a shrinking population without immigration. And clearly we need immigration, although we need immigration reform. Let me just also note that I think you're going to see a lot more automation in the way of robots with regard to childcare and with regard to healthcare as well.
And senior care. Japan, robots take care of old people. We're going to see that too. I looked up housing prices. So the best time in the past decade to buy a house was in the depths of COVID. Q2 2020, median house price $317,000. Since then, average price has gone up more than $100,000. It's been over $400,000 for the past 3 years.
One of the biggest weights on that, on the birth rates, because the birth rates have been dropping, are healthcare and childcare.
Yeah, that's right.
It's so expensive to have a child, and it's so expensive to take care of a child. So a lot of individuals, if we could honestly, if we were to, if we could fix or work on those two things, I think the birth rate would, rise, because that's a heavy burden on people. If you look at, if you go to one hospital, it's $60,000 to have a child. You go to another hospital, it's $55,000 to have a child. That's just outrageous, but that's the average price.
It's too high. We haven't heard from Dr. Sharif and in Asia and see what's taking place there.
Yeah, thank you. This is very interesting discussion. I have two questions to Honorable David Walker, and that I'm working with in the South Asia. So today I share one of my book, And my initiative, we have a conference and we have our real urban planning with this Himalaya, Ganga, Bay of Bengal, and Padma. Why am I bringing these things? Because look, I am a big fan of artificial intelligence, how it's integrating with this society, with this industry, with this academia. It has huge impact. Second, in terms of human wisdom, let's say what I'm discussing, I do research in the last 7 years, even in USA with Stanford University, with NASA, even in Bangladesh and in some top class universities, as well as India Institute of Technology, how I'm working. Trust me, this is my honest opinion as an computer engineer. In terms of wisdom, if you bring this Himalaya and Padma and Ganga and Bay of Bengal and this business strategy right away, AI will do all of the wrong informations. AI will bring all of the wrong information about this location, about the culture, about food, about business strategy, about the blueprint, about all of the things. Uh, on the other hand, I do more prefer on wisdom. What actually David Walker bring in this table, what Nick Palveda bring in these discussions. So David Walker, what you think about this human wisdom? Still, I believe I meet with a lot of people, every part of the corners, and I find that human wisdom, is my opinion, is the one of the biggest thing. Still, they will play a role, and AI will be our tool to solve or do our work effectively. Second questions, I think this is more relevant for today's sessions because I asked two questions. One was question already Honorable David Walker give the answer. To what extent did the Trump administration fiscal and monetary policy environment contribute to the short term? What I think Jetovi tried to impose short term economic expansion versus the long term risk. Like how you want to compare these economic issues. So two things. Number one, what your thought about human wisdom to bring new innovations, bring new culture, bring new economic activities. I'm bringing this $1 trillion economic activities in South Asia. And secondly, what you think about the short-term and long-term things. Thank you.
All right. First thing on AI. I think AI is going to be a tremendous advantage with regard to research, data gathering, data analysis. But one of the things that I think that humans will continue to be critical for, it will be judgment and so-called wisdom. You're not going to, AI is not going to give you that. Okay. It can give you a tremendous amount of data. It can give you a number of things that you ought to consider, if you will. But coming back to something that Mark said before, ultimately you need to have a human to be able to either program the AI as to what kind of information it's providing. You can't take away the judgment and wisdom that requires a human being to be able to do it. Secondly, with regard to Trump, I think Trump has done a number of things that have helped with regard to short-term economic growth. However, the jury is out as to what the longer-term implications are going to be. Okay. For example, you all know that I have a tremendous concern about the fact that the United States has lost control of its finances, and that we face large deficits, mounting debt burdens, which, unlike at the end of World War II, where we were bringing down debt to GDP, now we're increasing debt to GDP. And as I hear a lot of the things that the president wants to do, including expanding defense spending by $500 billion without potentially paying for it, that's going to exacerbate that problem. Okay. So, only God knows, when we might hit the wall with regard to our structural debt challenge, and God's not telling us. But what we do know is we will at some point if we don't come to grips with it. And I will tell you that I am growing increasingly frustrated with the inability of the Congress to be able to deal with some of these serious structural stewardship challenges. And I'm going to do what I can to do a lot in 2026 to try to be able to change that. But we got too many people living for today and not enough people trying to help create a better tomorrow.
So,
Rick?
question for the Congress has the slimmest leadership margin, I think, in history now. Is it possible we'll get some action out of Congress before the midterms?
Well, one of the things that I take a little bit of optimism out of is I've been arguing for quite some time that we need a statutory commission that will engage the American people with the facts, the truth, the tough choices, solicit input, and make a package of tax, spending, budget, and other recommendations for a guaranteed vote in Congress that learns the lessons from Simpson Bowles. There is a bill in Congress, H.R. 3289, I believe it is, 3289, which is a bipartisan bill that would create such a commission that last week the 50 to 52 member bipartisan problem solvers caucus endorsed. And so I'm going to do what I can to see if we can get that bill a hearing and a markup in the House Budget Committee and to get passed and then moved on to the Senate. So that's one thing which should be done this year. Whether it will be done is a different story. Wouldn't report until after the midterms because you need enough time to be able to do the citizen education engagement and the related analysis. But the second thing that I've been working on is to get the Congress to discharge its express, non-discretionary ministerial duty to call a limited convention of states to propose a fiscal responsibility amendment. On that front, they seem to be wanting to just stiff the states. And therefore, I'm working to try to get a state attorney general to be able to sue the Congress, because I think that's the only thing that's going to break that through. And I've got a couple that I'm talking to, and hopefully we can get one of them off the dime in the not too distant future, because that's what it's going to take in order for Congress to be able to discharge their responsibilities. And, candidly, I've seen a lot of proposals, even in the last week, saying, well, we're going to pass something that says we got to have a deficit of not more than 3% of GDP. But those statutory approaches don't stand the test of time. They don't work. The only thing that can bind current and future Congresses is a constitutional amendment. And by the way, if you reduce the deficit to 3% of GDP, that's fine if you're growing by more than 3% of GDP. But if you're not growing by more than 3% of GDP, it doesn't really solve anything. Plus, it assumes that we're already okay with regard to debt to GDP. And the truth is we're not. We're already too high. We need to be bringing it down, not stabilizing it.
In Europe, what they did is the European Union.
Oh, I was going to say, can you also add in to that regulation or that lawsuit, Dave, to allow for states to set regulations around AI? Because that's another issue again that was put out there along with everything that we're talking about. But the deregulation of AI, allowing and blocking states to regulate AI is a problem.
Well, I think in the end, they're going to probably use the Interstate Commerce Clause to be able to say that needs to be regulated at the federal level. That's my gut feeling.
Federal level. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I think they're going to do that too.
Yeah.
But only certain groups are going to actually benefit from AI, and certain groups are going to be displaced. David, don't you think without this? See, in the European Union, they forced Spain, Italy, and Greece to lower their debt to GDP ratio, or they kick them out of the European Union. The problem with the United States, there's nowhere people can tell them stop this insanity. And it also happened, I believe, in Japan, where they kept spending money they didn't have, that Japan's debt to GDP ratio is closer to 200%.
It's
creating an economic slowdown. Is it over 200?
Over 200, but once it got over 100, they started having significant economic challenges with regard to growth.
Right.
Also with regard to the stock market, et cetera. And we're not exempt from the laws of prudent finance. I mean, the bottom line is the only thing that will bind current and future Congresses to restore and sustain fiscal sanity is a constitutional amendment. That's the only thing. You need the commission.
Right.
You need the commission in order to till the ground and set the table for a range of tough spending and tax choices, et cetera, in order to start getting us on a glide path where debt to GDP will get down to a reasonable, sustainable level. And we need a credit card limit. We need a limit as to how much we can mortgage the future of this country and future generations. And the only way you can do that is through a constitutional amendment.
Right. And so far, though, the Senate or the House have not taken the initiative to call for a fiscal stability commission. Correct.
The House has H.R. 3289, which is a bipartisan bill which would create such a statutory commission. It needs some amendments, okay, in order to maximize its chance of success. And as I said last week, the 50 to 52 member equally divided bipartisan problem solvers caucus in the House endorsed that bill. Okay. And that's a positive thing. We want to try to do what we can to get that bill enacted into law this year, to get the commission started. It wouldn't report until next year. You don't want, it needs time to be able to engage the public and to consider different options. And neither side of the aisle really wants to deal with this before the midterms as far as having to deal with the actual recommendations. Rick?
So on Twitter, I see people complaining that the defense budget hasn't been audited in years or decades. Is that a thing? And is that something that could happen? Because we're talking, a ton of money, pushing $1 trillion? I don't know. But
yeah. This next year it'll be $1 trillion, unless they end up giving them another $500 billion, which Trump is asking.
So is there any way to get defense spending under control?
Let me give you the facts. Let me give you the facts on this, Rick. There's something called the Chief Financial Officers Act, which was enacted back in the early 1990s, that requires every major department and agency to have an annual financial statement audit. Now, financial statement audit is basically, are the numbers fairly presented in all material respects, consistent with generally accepted accounting principles? It's not economy. It's not efficiency. It's not effectiveness. It's not, whether there's any fraud, unless it's material. And so the only major department and agency that has not been able to achieve an opinion on its financial statements is the DOD. And my gut feeling is they're probably, at least 3 to 5 years away from being able to do that. There's a number of efforts underway to try to get them to that point. But there's a lot of things that need to be done beyond the financial statement audits that deal more with economy, efficiency, effectiveness, and fighting fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement. And believe me, there's plenty of opportunity in the Defense Department. And that's one of the things that concerns me about spending another $500 billion for defense. There's already a lot of waste in defense. And the other thing is that when I hear things about a Trump-class battleship, I'm saying, what are we doing building battleships in a time that you've got total visibility of the battle space above the water, and when with drone warfare and other types of weapon systems, surface ships are extremely vulnerable. I mean, we ought to be doing a lot more unmanned things rather than manned things, so that's just another example of, might look good, but it may not make any sense at all.
So Ukraine, a much smaller country under, in terrible, straits, is able to build 10,000 drones a day, 4 million a year. I mean, that's the future.
Yeah, no, I think the future is unmanned vehicles. Okay, whether it be air, whether it be surface, whether it be under the water, I think that's the future. And while we do need, manned, like, for example, one of the things we're talking about is having a lot of unmanned aerial vehicles that would accompany F-22s or F-35s or whatever, but they would also provide additional protection as well as additional kinetic power. Come back to AI. AI can do a lot of things, right? But humans are needed for judgment. Humans are needed for wisdom. And it's the same thing with regard to warfare.
Well, actually, AI lands airplanes right now. They actually, when you are on an airplane, they can put on auto land, and the computer will land your plane safely. However, some people say, well, we could have air flights without pilots. However, I think everybody would feel very uncomfortable getting on an airplane, at least today, where there is no pilot and the computer does the takeoff, autopilot, and auto land, and you don't have a pilot in there. So I think at least for the foreseeable future, you want a pilot on whatever you're doing in terms of AI. And
we're currently in the babysitting phase of AI. In every field, AI can do amazing stuff, but you need a human supervisor to step in and make sure AI isn't hallucinating.
Correct.
Yeah, that's correct.
I mean, yeah, we are definitely in the baby stages of AI, but the growth rate of AI in terms of it being able to do things is not what we're used to. And we have to be able to understand that. Because if you look at, I mean, your transitions from horse and buggy to car, when the Ford Model T got built, it took a couple of years before people started leaving away the horse and buggy. When the electric car came out, we didn't even think about the electric car, which came out years ago. And we didn't even think about how the technologies around even industry itself. But the growth rate of AI, if it took from what was it, 1902 with the Ford Model T?
Right.
So you got really early 1900s that when the horse and buggy disappeared basically in the 1940s. So you're looking about 40 years. And then you got airplanes and everything else. The airplanes from Kitty Hawk took off, but then they took off and it took, about 50, 60 years. AI is not like that. AI within the next year will take over so much. Right now, they do already have those flying taxis, which are, it was a concept just last year, but now they have it to creation to where you can actually get into a taxi that flies alone, literally flies. So in terms of the coding and everything else, yeah, it's once that curve that we're used to that goes up slightly. No, that curve is more so like at the end of a U where it goes straight up. It's not going to be some simple, hey, we're going to have to get used to it. No, it's we can say we're in the baby steps, but that baby steps may be a teenager tomorrow.
No, babysitting stage.
100 years old the day after that.
Babysitting.
Babysitting, where you need to supervise AI. You gotta get in there and look at all of AI's results to make sure that AI isn't bullshitting you.
It may be babysitting.
Yeah, well, even in law practice,
it may be babysitting today, but then 2 days from now, it may be babysitting us. I mean, it's just that's how fast this growth rate around AI is. How fast the technology learns and how much more we're utilizing it now. That's why we really have to be prepared for it. And really, I think that's where that regulations and understanding, we need to really invest time into understanding AI more so than just investing money into AI.
Yeah. Even in law practice, a lot of the briefs are being written by AI, but sometimes there's mistakes and judges get really upset if the attorney has not reviewed the entire brief that was drafted by AI. But what's happening is a lot of the legal papers, the motions, a lot of legal practice is today done by artificial intelligence with an attorney review, as opposed to it used to be you'd send it to an associate to go do all the research. Now you send it to your computer and let your computer do all the research. So I think you're going to see a lot of change in the legal.
Nick, I have one observation. So when I was 19, I was children, very small, like kids, like 5-6 years old. So that time, I learned from BBC and CNN that the Western world bring the idea of globalizations. They do not want to do anything manufacturing in USA. They want to manufacture everything in China or in the low labor things, and all of the brilliant peoples and all of the brilliant idea, the globalizations and everything's happening. So I learn it, and I can remember every classes I have to read and write and many things about attending the exam for the globalizations. IMF come, World Bank comes, all of the system change, multinational company come, all of the system change. After this 30, 40 years, I think 30 years or 35 years, Trump come and they said, make America great again, that we did all of the wrong. We lose our economic control through China. The same way, right now, I am observing everybody saying that AI do this, AI do that, AI will do this. I believe Western world should focus on to maintain their economy, understand the cultures, understand the values of the people. The same way, maybe after 10 years, you can say that we lose our race in front of AI. The same way you are talking right now that we lose our race in front of China because of the globalizations. We need to make our dream and America great again. So human intelligence, what I'm talking about, talent economy, wisdom, most powerful things in human history. Who build up AI? Human build up AI. This is not other things. Who build up all of the podcast? It's a human. Who is the most intelligent person in this show? It's a human. Who is the great audience? Human. So believe in human. I do not want to listen after 10 years that we did all of the wrong from America and we lose our second race in front of AI. That is my concern about Western world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And we want to thank our panel because we're at the hour. We want to thank our panel and our viewers in the United States and around the world. We'll see you next week on Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. Take care.